Back, well, I'm sure you felt the stress that our society is under at the moment. We have rising food prices, the horrors still of the pandemic, fuel prices going through the roof, and of course the fact that you're so often in the dark because of Eskom makes it all so much worse. And this stress in our society must be having a big impact on our children. The now concern is actually very difficult to get psychiatric help for our children. Dr. Alicia Porter is a board member of the South African Society of Psychiatrists. She joins us now. Dr. Porter, good afternoon to you. We're all under so much stress at the moment. What kind of impact does that have on our children?
Hi, good afternoon, Stephen. I think that our children are as stressed as we are, if not worse off than we are, in the sense that they have had lots of disruptions, particularly to their development as children. And so what we've seen is an increase in anxiety, an increase in depression, an increase in eating disorders, post-traumatic stress, suicidal thoughts and ideations, and even self-harm. So our children are as distressed as we have been. I think they've always been, but I think COVID has made this even worse.
I mean, it seems to me that it's actually harder to grow up now than it was when I grew up a long time ago. In other words, you've got the stress of social media, which I never had to deal with. How you look, I think, has become even more important. There are other issues in our society that have made it a lot more stressful. A lot of parents might say, oh, well, it was tough for me. Is it tougher for their children than it was for them?
It's 110% tougher, like you mentioned, with access to technology and social media. We've seen the research tells us that there's been an increase in mental health concerns that has been directly related to that. So it's not the same as it was. But the problem is that children haven't developed more than we did when we were younger. So the development has followed the same trajectory, but what they're being exposed to now, you know, with social media and cyberbullying and all of those things, definitely has had a negative impact on their mental health.
So this would obviously affect psychologically. Children would be under stress. They would feel in a particular way because of that stress. What happens to them psychiatrically? When you're under stress, can that trigger certain psychiatric reactions?
I mean, yes, because, you know, from a biological point of view, stress is not a passive process. So when you're stressed, you're excreting, for example, different types of hormones. And that leads to a biological reaction. And so that definitely leads to things like depression because, you know, for psychiatric conditions, you need you get biological causes and you can get psychological causes and then environmental causes. So with regards to the biology, that can become, that can become negatively impacted. But also with children, particularly in adolescence, there's the hormonal aspects. There's difference in terms of development. So all of those things can impact in depression, in anxiety, and a host of psychiatric conditions.
What do you need to look out for? I mean, what do you need to watch for in your children?
I mean, you know, children are a little bit more complex than adults because they cannot articulate how they are feeling, so they would act out. So if you notice changes in children's behavior, if you notice that they are isolating themselves, with children, one of the big telltale signs is their academic performance at school, where you'll see a decline in their functioning. Children who would previously like to engage in activities no longer want to do so. But even just things like changes in their sleeping patterns, their eating patterns, their energy levels, those are often telltale signs. And even an increase in irritability and things like complaints like headaches and tummy aches, you know, these recurrent complaints, muscle tension, all of those things could possibly be red flags that there's something more going on rather than just being a phase or a child being naughty.
One of the funny things about children is so often, I mean, I'm a parent, I have two children, a boy and a girl, and so often anyone I speak to about parenting in public, you know, on TV will say, one of the best things to do is to spend more time with your children. I'm aware of no parent that wishes they could spend less time with their children. I think most of us want to spend as much time with our children as we can. The problem is that as adults, we're under the most intense stress that I think we can remember, apart from maybe the time of the hard lockdown. And it's cumulative. You know, we had the pandemic, the hard lockdown, people we know are passing away, then the war in Ukraine, which may not affect us directly, but does because of food prices. So is it actually harder to be a parent than it hasn't been in the past?
It is definitely harder to be a parent because we are, as parents, under a lot more stress, and children are sponges. So, you know, they might not be able to articulate or to voice, but they're definitely watching us as parents. They pick up on our distress. And oftentimes you'll find when parents are distressed, you'll find distressed children. And so, you know, our work with children is not just the child as an individual. We often have to look at the child. We have to look at them in context of the family, and we also have to look at them in the context of school. You know, so it's not just treating the individual. Oftentimes you have to treat the system in order to treat the child. And if the system is distressed, the child is definitely going to be distressed.
So what do you do? I mean, as I understand, there are only, I think, 30 child psychiatrists in the country. That's a tiny number. I mean, that's more than, you know, that's probably something like 500,000, maybe 800,000 children per child psychiatrist. I mean, there's no way people are going to get the treatment they need.
You know, and that is the challenge. But I do think that what we need to do is start to look at building coping skills and resilience within our children. And I think that that can be done by incorporating mental health into the school curriculum and also empowering teachers, for example, to be able to pick up mental health conditions within the school setting, teaching them, you know, empowering them or upskilling them with basic counseling skills, for example. But I also think that, you know, even as parents, because parenting is, contrary to popular belief, it's not something that comes sort of naturally. And I know in the unit where I work, in managing the child, we offer parent counseling, where we actually teach parents about parenting and things that they would need to do. So we cover things like boundaries, we cover things like discipline, you know, and a range of different topics that are. So it's about how do we as parents also empower ourselves to actually parent in the 21st century. I think it's very different to the way we were parented. And, you know, things have changed. And I think that it would be useful for us to keep abreast and parent children for the world that they're actually going to inhabit now, not for the world that we inhabited previously. But I also do think that we need to update policy, and there needs to be implementation, because we've had, you know, policy but no implementation at any level, really. And so there needs to be a greater investment in child and adolescent mental health, because children are the future. And if we don't deal with the child and adolescent mental health problems now, these are going to be the adults of the future. And what we know is that most adult mental health problems actually start at the average age of 14 anyway, and that would lead to...
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's important advice. Dr. Alicia Porter, board member of the South African Society of Psychiatrists. I do appreciate it.